A hush lay upon Winterfell beneath the iron-gray sky, the hush that comes only when the snow has grown tired of falling and lies deep and heavy, smoothing every jagged stone and length of broken palisade beneath a rippling white mantle. In the gods' wood, the last of autumn's blood-red leaves clung to the oaks like forgotten pennons, trembling each time the wind sighed through the branches. It was there, by the moss-blanketed heart tree, that Jon Snow found Maester Luwin's raven, black wings stark against the ground, parchment bound to its leg with soft green ribbon no northern bird had ever worn. Jon's fingers were stiff with cold as he worked the knot loose. He expected another warning from Lord Commander Mormont, reports of wildling fires along the Frostfangs, or word of some fresh loss on the Shadow Tower's windswept heights. But instead the seal upon the parchment was a golden rose, its petals gilded with beeswax so fine that even the chill could not dull its shine. Tyrell seal, he thought, bewildered. What in the seven would the Reach want with the wall? He read the letter twice, 3 times, before the words settled like stones in his chest. Then he slipped it into the breast of his cloak, laid a gloved hand upon the weirwood's pale bark, and listened for the slow heartbeat of Winterfell beneath the snow. He felt nothing at first, only the hush, the icy breeze, the ancient scent of pine and frozen earth. But after a time he fancied he heard distant iron bells tolling across the sea of stone and forest. A wedding bell, or a funeral. Far to the south, in a garden that smelled of warm soil and budding roses, Lady Olenna Tyrell sat beneath a trellis of climbing winter jasmine, her lace mitts as white as the blossoms overhead. A blue-winged jay alighted on the marble balustrade, cocking its head at her knitting needles. She ignored it. "Margaery, child," she said, voice crisp as frost. "You're tangling the yarn again. Stop fluttering about like a little sparrow and come here." Her granddaughter obeyed, skirts whispering over the flagstones. Margaery's gown was the color of summer moss, embroidered with silver vine leaves that winked when she moved. In her hands she held another letter, the same message Jon Snow now carried in Winterfell, though hers bore the stark direwolf and a second seal marked with the fiery heart of Stannis Baratheon. That sigil had come as a surprise to Olenna. Surprises were an old woman's bane. "Grandmother," Margaery began, "is this truly wise? The north is so far and so cold. I have never seen a snowflake except in the high passes, and even there it melted on my glove." "Cold preserves," Olenna said, snipping a loose thread with silver shears. "Rot treif's in warmt. Best stay chilly, I say, if we mean to keep the flesh sweet." She peered over her spectacles. "They want the Tyrell grain, and we, despite our many gardens, will soon crave northern timber and good northern iron if the war drags on another year. Your brothers will need it for armor, Highgarden will need it for siege engines, and you will need every advantage the north may grant when the lions sniff us out." Margaery smoothed the parchment, eyes lingering on Robb Stark's bold, looping hand. The young wolf had written of alliances, of a realm shattered like a mirror on a stone floor, each shard reflecting blood and iron. He proposed to unite the Tyrell strength with the northern will by binding Margaery to his half-brother, though rumors whispered Jon was no bastard at all, but a lord's son in exile along the wall. "A bastard," she said softly. "A Lord Commander's steward, more like." Olenna clicked her tongue. "Titles are gusts of wind, child. Show me a man whose banner keeps the rain off when the sky blackens. This Jon Snow, Stark or Snow, has brothers among the wildlings, it is said, and a king's blood in him too if the stories hold true. One more story cannot hurt." Margaery folded the letter with careful grace. "You speak as if I have already agreed. If you hadn't, I would not have let the ravens fly." Olenna's eyes, bright as frost diamonds, danced with mirth. "Besides, even roses must weather winter now and then." 3 ravens winged their way eastward that dawn, scudding over the neck's endless bogs and the black mirror of the twins, where Walder Frey counted his brood like coppers in a miser's purse. They skirted the smoking fields outside Harrenhal, soared beyond the trampled gold of the King's Road, and circled once above the bite-smelling forests of the Wolfswood before settling upon Winterfell's rookery. There, Maester Luwin found them, brushed the snow from their feathers, and hurried to the great hall where Jon waited beside the ancient hearth. Bran sat in his wheeled chair near the fire, gray eyes alight with curiosity. Rickon prowled at his knee, Shaggy Dog's dark shape lurking behind. The boy watched as Jon opened each message, spreading them on the carved oaken table. One scroll bearing Highgarden's seal, another penned in King Stannis' measured script, and a third in Robb's own hand. Robb says Lord Stannis commands the North by right of conquest. Bran read aloud, voice thin but steady. He claims the Iron Throne false and would crown himself in Winterfell, but will recognize our lords if we submit and name him king in the North. Rickon scowled. Submit? His small fists clenched. No wolf bends the knee to a stag. Especially not one who barely knows the North, Jon murmured. The second letter, Stannis's, was colder still. The usurper demanded oaths of loyalty in the name of a god of fire and shadow, promising justice for traitors who knelt before lions. Yet he offered little beyond harsh words and a crimson-cloaked priestess. It was the Tyrell scroll that drifted Jon's thoughts southward. Soft reach parchment, scented faintly of dried rose petals. Margaery Tyrell wrote in a fine, flowing hand, her ink the green of new leaves. Lord Snow, though winter may chill hearts to ice, still they may thaw beneath spring's touch. He read in silence, cheeks warming. Bran watched him, one brow arched. She writes fair, the boy said at last. Jon folded the parchment, slipping it into his belt. Words are wind, he echoed Olenna, though he did not know from whence the saying came. We shall see what actions follow. The journey from Highgarden to White Harbor took 6 weeks of dangerous riding. Along the Mander's lazy bends, through King's Landing's bickering throng, up the rutted King's Road past shattered Riverland's fields where wolves howled at night. Margaery traveled with a retinue of 70 horse, 20 wagons, and a riot of septas whose prayers could not drown out the drums of war echoing over every hill. Men whispered that the Lannisters were mustering in the west, that Edmure Tully's levies held Riverrun only by their fingertips, that Lord Bolton had vanished into the mists beyond the neck. At Maidenpool they rested one night. Margaery walked the ramparts beneath a thin sliver of moon, Olenna hobbling at her side. Salt air stung their throats. Below, the tide hissed like 1,000 serpents coiled around the dock pilings. Remember this smell? Olenna told her. The North Sea is wilder still, brine and ice, and the musk of leviathans. No perfume you wear will mask it. It will cling to your gowns as stubbornly as rumor. Margaery lifted her chin. If winter claims the roses, so be it. Spring will follow in time. Humph. Olenna's breath plumed white. Just mind you plant enough seeds before the snows come. In White Harbor, Lord Wyman Manderly feasted them upon slabs of honeyed ham, oysters swimming in pale ale, and river eels stuffed with onions and bacon. Sailors danced reels in the torchlight. Wine flowed like the white knife in flood. Yet even amid that warmth Margaery felt the north rising about her. Icy breath seeping through shutter cracks, the high-pitched cry of snow geese wheeling in the night. The way men's laughter died quick and sharp when a gust rattled the hall's tiled roof. On the second morning Jon Snow arrived with a party of 50 sworn swords. He rode a gray courser, cloak of black bear fur flung back to reveal plain leather brigandine. Dawn frost glimmered in his dark curls and shadow. The great direwolf that had followed him south paced at his stirrup, eyes like 2 burning coals in its ash-colored mask. Margaery had heard tales of direwolves, monstrous beasts who could rip a man in half and not slow their lope. Yet when she stepped onto the snow-dusted courtyard, Shadow merely gazed, solemn as any maester's old hound, and bowed its head. The gesture seemed strangely courtly. "I had feared you lost," Jon said, dismounting. His voice was low, roughened by cold nights and unspoken cares. "The roads are treacherous these days. My grandmother would march to Gisker if it pleased her," Margaery answered. "White Harbor is hardly so distant." Olenna snorted from atop her palfrey. "Distant enough for fools. Let's below, lest we all freeze and you two begin sprouting icicles from your noses." She prodded Margaery with her cane. "Off you go, girl. Show him you can walk on snow without squealing." Margaery did so, velvet slippers crunching softly. Jon offered his arm. She rested her gloved fingers upon it and felt the tension there, coiled as tightly as a drawn bowstring. "You wear no sword," she observed. "My oath to the Night's Watch forbade me." He glanced toward his companions. "But the war has made orphans of many vows. An orphan may yet find a home," she replied, though she wondered whether she spoke to him or herself. That first night they supped in Lord Wyman's Solar. A small party, Jon, Margaery, Lady Olenna, Ser Willis Tyrell, who had joined them on the road, and Davos Seaworth, King Stannis' ragged onion knight, sent north as an envoy. Candles guttered in the drafts. Cold crept between stone blocks, and though the dishes were rich, the conversation tasted of frost. Stannis' letter lay between Davos's sea-scarred hands. "His Grace will march for Winterfell come the thaw," Davos said. "He asks only that the North remember which king bled for them at the wall." Jon's gray eyes fixed on the parchment. "Yet he would burn the old gods in their own groves." His voice was mild, but a mild wind may hide a buried blade of ice. "The North remembers many things, Onion Knight." Davos bowed his head. "Aye, my lord, she does." He looked to Margaery then, and the old smuggler's gaze held none of the slyness she expected in courtier eyes. Instead, she saw a quiet sorrow, as though Davos mourned something precious already lost. Her sweet summer days, perhaps. Olenna tapped her plate. "Summer passes for us all. What matters is who holds the torch when the long night falls." She settled her spectacles higher on her nose. "Tell your king that roses and wolves may yet guard his flank, if his shadow priests keep their fires banked. And if the Reach's grain fills his granaries," added Willis. "Let us speak plainly." Davos warmed his palms above a brazier. "Plain talk for plain men suits me." He hesitated, eyeing Jon. "Will you accept Stannis' pardon? He means to name you Lord of Winterfell." A silence followed, loud as thunder in the small room. Jon drew breath. Margaery's stomach fluttered like a caged dove. Lord of Winterfell, she thought. Lord husband. Her mind raced. Visions of a frost-rimmed seat high above the world, of corridors echoing with children's laughter, of Tyrell green twining with northern gray upon banners snapping in a snow-bright sky. But Jon shook his head. "Winterfell is Bran's," he said softly. "Rickon's. The North will answer to them when the snows melt. And to you." Bran's voice drifted from the door. They all turned. The crippled boy wheeled himself inside, cheeks flushed from exertion. "Father named you blood of his blood. The gods may demand duty heavier than vows sworn in a black cloak." His eyes, gray, implacable, passed to Margaery. "And the North may need new roots if she is to bloom again." Jon knelt, resting a hand on Bran's shoulder. "I am no king." "No," Bran agreed. "But kings will need you." In days that followed, they spoke often, Jon and Margaery, walking the snowy quays where gulls shrieked overhead, their footsteps leaving twin tracks that the tide soon devoured. Conversation began with formalities. Grain weights, levy counts, the price of rye in Deepwood Motte, but drifted to gentler shores. The taste of Winterfell apples roasted with cinnamon, the scent of lemon cakes rising in Highgarden's summer kitchens, the feel of cold steel beneath a glove, the thrill of galloping bareheaded through a field of blooming flowers. Margaery learned that Jon's laugh, seldom heard, was low and startled, as though he had forgotten how laughter felt. She learned that he missed his sisters fiercely, and worried that ghosts walked Winterfell's ruined corridors. Jon learned that Margaery could name every bird that nested in Highgarden's hedgerows, that she had once nursed a wounded lynx kit back to health, and that she feared the stillness of deep water more than any battle. One dawn they stood upon White Harbor's seawall watching a pod of blackfin porpoises chase silver herring into the shallows. Margaery hugged her cloak close. "I am not made for snows," she murmured. "Snows can be shaped," Jon said, scooping a handful, pressing it into a rough sphere. He handed it to her. "It holds the form you give it. So may we, if we choose." She turned the snowball in her palm, warmth melting it slowly. "And if the spring sun melts us first, then we seep into the earth and water new life. Nothing is truly lost." Shadow padded beside them, tail sweeping frost. The direwolf's breath rose in curling plumes. Margaery touched the beast's thick ruff cautiously. Shadow's head lifted, eyes half closing in content. "He is gentler than rumor," she said. Jon stroked the wolf's ear. "He senses hearts. He believes yours true." "Then I am glad I brushed my hair this morning," she teased, smiling despite the cold. Jon looked at her then, truly looked, and Margaery felt the hush of falling snow again. The hush that stills the world before something vast and new begins. It was Lady Olenna who set the date for the betrothal feast before the Reach convoy resumed its trek north. "Linger too long and the lions will scent blood," she warned Jon as he escorted her through the harbor market. "Best wed beneath hearthstone and pine before gold cloaks come skulking after their rose." White Harbor's sept was small, built of rough-hewn granite with a humble altar to the seven. Some Northmen muttered at kneeling to southern gods, but Wyman Manderly soothed them with promises of trade and Tyrell coin. Margaery knelt before the altar in a gown of deep wintergreen velvet, her hair plaited with sprigs of dried ivy. Jon wore a doublet the color of storm clouds, the dire wolf of Stark embroidered upon one breast in silver thread. When he took her hands, his gloves were off, skin warm despite the chill. The Septon's words echoed off stone and vaulted timber, drowned now and then by the crash of waves against the seawall. When the ceremony ended, Ser Willis raised his cup. "To the North Reach Alliance," he proclaimed. "May wolves and roses grow entwined." "Amen," Davos murmured, though his thoughtful gaze lingered on Jon, and perhaps on the shadows that flickered in every corner. That night the feasting spilled into the streets. Barrels of spiced ale were rolled out, and lanterns bobbed like stars above the dark water. Margaery danced thrice with Jon, once with Bran, who laughed when Rickon spun his chair too quickly, and once with Lord Wyman, whose girth turned the waltz into a gentle wobble of tides. Snow fell in slow, lazy flakes, glowing amber in torchlight. Later, beneath the eaves of the Newtimber Inn, Margaery watched Jon speak with a pair of Karstark men arrived from Winterfell. Their words were hushed, tense. When he returned, his brow was furrowed. "News?" she asked. "Bolton banners gather in the Dreadfort," he said, "and wildlings mass at the wall's shadow to the east. Storms close the neck. We must leave at first light." Margaery laid a hand on his arm. "Then we face winter together." He studied her, snowflakes melting on his lashes. "Together?" he echoed, and his voice held something she had not heard before. Hope, perhaps, or resignation sweetened by trust. They rode at dawn, hooves crunching through drifted lanes, banners snapping. The silver direwolf and the golden rose, entwined upon a field of frost-pale blue. As White Harbor fell behind them, Margaery glanced back once. Saw gulls circling the ramparts, saw Maiden's Harbor shining like bronze in the newborn sun. Ahead, the King's Road stretched north, winding through silent forests where the trees wore crowns of snow. Beside her, Jon Snow rode in silence, cloak billowing. Shadow trotted before them, a dark arrow slicing the virgin drifts. Margaery inhaled the pine-sharp air and felt her pulse match the horse's steps. Winter might yet claim the realm, might bury fields and choke rivers, but beneath the white lay seeds waiting. She would plant them in the north, water them with resolve, and one day watch roses bloom crimson against the snow. She dared not let the thought linger. Ahead awaited Winterfell's charred bones, Bolton daggers, Lannister gold, Stannis' fires. Yet here, in this quiet moment, hope was a green bud curling bravely through ice. Jon turned toward her, as though he felt the shape of her thoughts. He offered a slow smile, small, uncertain, but warm as sun on new flowers. Margaery returned it, and felt the hush lift, replaced by the distant beating of drums. Not war drums, but the steady drum of two hearts keeping time, forging something neither snow nor shadow could smother. And so they rode, wolves and roses together, into the deep white blank page of northern winter where their story awaited its next ink-dark line. The last lanterns of White Harbor dwindled behind them until only the sea's distant roar and the icy hush of the King's Road remained. Dawn light, pale as tarnished silver, crept across a sky lined with ragged clouds. The column moved north as though threading a whitened labyrinth. Tyrell green cloaks alongside stark gray, the banners clasped together atop a single ashwood pole that Ser Willis had insisted ride at their forefront. The image of a rose entwined with a dire wolf fascinated the small folk in each scattered hamlet they passed. Children ran beside the horses a little way, giggling at Shadow's monstrous silhouette and clutching dried blossoms to fling at Margaery's stirrups. Jon noted every face, a habit born of years on the wall, where every stranger might be a White's puppet, and met each shy greeting with a nod that felt almost foreign. He had bowed to lords and faced kings, yet the trust of farmwives carrying sapstiff bundles of kindling unnerved him more than Mance Rayder's spear throng ever had. War heroes were expected, perhaps, to ride tall and bright. Jon felt instead like a trespasser among their fragile hopes. On the third dusk they reached a squat tower house named Lawrence Lantern, half buried in snowdrifts that reached its arrow slits. The inn's thatch sagged beneath icing as thick as wedding cake frosting, and the tie beams groaned with each gust of wind. Inside, flickering hearths cast a copper glow over pine smoke haze. Jon saw to stabling and guard rotations while Willis coaxed the chamberlain into opening deep cellars of applejack. Margaery warmed her hands above a brazier fashioned from an overturned helm, laughing softly at the absurdity even as she inhaled the sweet sharp scent of the liquor heating nearby. The noise of knives on trenchers and the clack of dice over a weather-stained table lulled the hall. Outside, Shadow's howl drifted once, then subsided. When Jon joined her, snow still sparkled in his curls. She poured him a measure of the steaming jack without asking, passing the battered tin cup with a small flourish. He sipped cautiously. "I smell cinnamon," he said, surprised. "And clove. The innkeep traded for spices at Gulltown last summer." She rolled the steaming cup between her palms, watching the amber swirl. "It tastes like early harvest hall feasts, when the sun is crisp but not yet cruel, and every cook competes for Lord Paxter's favor." She smiled wistfully. "I used to sneak down with the dairy girls to steal handfuls of sugar-dusted fritters as they cooled. We were always caught, never punished, mind, but the thrill was everything." She offered the cup again. "Have you any childhood mischief? Something that still stirs your blood on long rides?" Jon hesitated. "Ghost and I once freed every horse in Winterfell's eastern stable before dawn," he admitted, voice low. "Robb claimed it was accidental, but..." He shook his head. "We wanted to see if we could gather them again before Maester Luwin rang the bell for lessons. We nearly managed, save one mare that kicked my shins so hard I limped a fortnight." Margaery laughed, bright, and her breath plumed white. Many eyes turned toward the sound. "Did Lord Eddard scold you?" "He stood beside Ser Roderick as we herded the last horse in," Jon recalled. "When the gate latched, he thanked us for testing the guard's alertness. Later, he had the Maresure teach us knots until our fingers bled. I think he wanted us to know every act carries echoes." "No act is ever silent," she agreed. Then, softer, "Some echoes never fade." Jon frowned. She saw grief pass fleetingly across his face. The weight of Maester Aemon's last words, of Ygritte's dying eyes, of every brother left along the frozen way. To soothe him, she changed the topic. "Tell me of these woods we enter tomorrow." "The Wolf's Den groves," he said, grateful. "Tall black pines older than Aegon's conquest. They mute the wind until you can't tell Branch Creek from Heartbeat." He traced an invisible map upon the table's knotted surface. "Game lanes twist like river deltas, easy to lose sense of direction. But if we keep the Talon Rill to our right, we'll reach Widow's Watch by week's end." "Widow's Watch," Margaery mused. "A sad name. Named for the women who waited upon that promontory for ships that never came home." His tone softened. "Yet its beacon has spared countless others. Sadness can still guide." That night, fatigue folded the company into uneasy sleep. Wind hissed through shutter cracks like whispering ghosts. Beyond the palisade, Shadow prowled, his massive paws silent upon ice. Snow-laced clouds parted to reveal a wolf-white moon, and the dire wolf lifted his muzzle. "Jon," half dreaming in a trundle strewn with furs, felt that cry vibrate through his chest as though it were his own. Weeks unspooled. The King's Road dwindled to a ridgeway beaten only by elk and Karstark patrols. Patches of raw earth showed where drifts had been churned by hooves. Here the column slowed, wary of hidden sinkholes. Jon's scouts returned with word of Bolton men sighted 2 valleys east. No more than 100, but flaying banners streamed behind them. Jon ordered torches kept low at night, and Margaery found herself riding with a hand always near the dagger Jon had pressed upon her in White Harbor. Its hilt of polished ash fit her grip like memory. One afternoon, a frozen fog descended so sudden the world turned milk-white. Riders vanished 3 paces ahead. Margaery heard only breathing horses, men, her own rasp of wool-muffled lungs. Then a shape loomed. A solitary weirwood towering from a boulder field, bark bleeding crimson sap streaks that gleamed against alabaster trunk. Jon swung down, eyes wary. He pressed a bare palm to the tree, head bowed. When he returned to his saddle, his cheeks were damp, though no tears chilled them. Margaery reached to clasp his gauntlet. Their gloves brushed, leather on leather. Wordless understanding passed between them. Whatever vow he prayed, she would honor. 2 days later they came upon 5 bodies. Bolton outriders strung from pine limbs, throats carved open, eyes crusted white. A burned sigil, 3-clawed, had been scrawled in ash upon their armor. "Free folk mark," murmured Bowen Marsh, one of Jon's watch comrades sent south months earlier. "They hunt behind the Dreadfort's lines." Jon studied the corpses. They meant for these to be found. Warn the flayed man his northern flank is no longer empty. Margaery swallowed hard, pressing a kerchief to her nose against the copper stench. "Can wildlings be our allies?" "They can be people," Jon said. "That may be enough." That evening the campfire council stretched past moonset beneath a sky burdened with northern lights. Ribbons of rose and green pulsing like the heartbeat of gods. Davos pored over maps with Ser Willis and Lyanna Mormont. Mere 10 years of age, but eyes bright as tempered steel, and Bran, wrapped in furs, listened, offering keen counsel that belied his seasons. Margaery knelt beside the darkling flames. "How fares King Stannis' march?" she asked Davos. "Slower," he sighed. "The king's pride drags heavier than his wagons." Snow sloughed a pass near the gift. Half the mule train overturned. Yet his men are hard as oak. The cold may thin their line, but not their purpose. Willis traced a finger along the map's ragged edge. "Bolton fields these numbers?" He listed troop figures from Davos's scouts, but Bran interrupted, calling attention to old mountain trails unknown to southern soldiers. "The flayed men think the neck barrier enough," the boy said, voice trembling only from cold. "Yet marsh walkers will guide sworn wolves through peat where iron never sinks." His tone carried eerie certainty. Jon glimpsed something vast behind Bran's young gaze, a secret as vast as the land itself. Margaery felt the council's focus shift subtly to her. "Highgarden can feed 2 armies, she offered. "If carts reach White Harbor's docks by midwinter day, grain may sail upriver to ferry lines near Barrowton. Stannis lacks forage. Feed him and he owes the Reach a debt he cannot repay in gold or roses." She smiled at Davos's startled look. "The ledgers of the Reach are my 3rd language. The first is diplomacy, the second gardens." The men chuckled, tension easing. Soon laughter faded. Plans hardened like pond ice under frost-still stars. Margaery retired to her tent near Jon's. She removed her gloves. Skin tingled where firelight flickered. A rustle drew her gaze. Jon at the flap, tall shadow half-lit. He hesitated until she beckoned him inside. They sat upon a cedar-scented rug, close enough that every heartbeat seemed shared. "I asked to see you," he began. "To speak before Winterfell's walls rise between us and words become banners." He searched her face. "The vow we made, our alliance, was born of need." His hand drifted to brush her sleeve. "But need is not the sum of it." Margaery's breath caught. "What more? Choice." He exhaled. "Since youth I've been chosen for, sent to the wall, thrust into battles. With you I would choose." Yet if our path darkens, you must be free." She laid her fingers over his. "And if I choose the darkened path? Then I will light it." The simplicity of his answer held no pledge of throne or crown, only presence immutable as granite. She leaned forward. Their lips met, gentle as snowfall atop a frozen rose. Cold air seeped through tent seams, but heat spread between them like kindling taking spark. When they parted, silence reigned, deeper than vows. At dawn, a raven arrived from Deepwood Motte. Asha Greyjoy had broken from Stannis' chain of command, harrying Bolton supply wagons along Kingshouse Ridge. The letter, penned in a bold, angular script, urged Jon to strike soon or lose the element of chaos. "Greyjoy mischief," Jon muttered. "Yet chaos is a ladder with missing rungs." They broke camp under slate-blue clouds stacked like castle keeps. By midday, a snow squall swallowed the world. Riders raised cloaks as makeshift tarpaulins. Shadow ranged ahead, vanishing into white only to reappear like a spirit at intervals. Somewhere in that swirling veil, a hunting horn sounded. Jon recognized its note, Karstark pattern. He spurred forward, Margaery close behind. They burst into a clearing where pine trunks stood like ebon pillars. 2 Karstark outriders grappled another rider clad in patchwork furs. The captive spat curses in a guttural tongue. Jon called halt, dismounted. Beneath the captive's hood, a woman's sharp eyes glittered wildling. She ceased struggling when she saw Jon. Recognition flickered. "Crow," she said, voice rasping with cold. "Your queen sent me." "Val?" Jon stepped closer. He recalled the wild beauty from Castle Black's dark days, sister to Mance's wife Dalla. She bled from a shallow forearm cut but stood fearless. Val nodded. "Tormund holds Frostmere Ridge with 500 spears. Rattleshirt raids Bolton patrols. They wait on your howl." She eyed Margaery. "Pretty southern flower. Will she bleed for the north?" "She grows thorns," Jon said. He untied Val's bonds himself, ignoring Karstark protests. "Your men will be fed tonight. And tomorrow we hunt," Val replied, flexing numb fingers. By firelight that night, Val and Margaery regarded one another across the circle of flames. 2 women of different storms. One forged in ice and survival, the other in courtly bloom and whispered intrigues. Yet each recognized the iron beneath the other's raiment. Val spoke of raids. Margaery countered with supply logistics. By the second skin of ale, they laughed like old comrades. Jon watched, a half-smile softening his habitual tension. Perhaps, he thought, alliances could be as resilient as ancient trees, rooted in unlikeliest soil yet storm-weathered all the same. On the 8th morning, the towers of Widow's Watch hove into sight, jagged silhouettes clinging to a cliffside above a foaming surf. Signal fires burned even in daylight. Lord Barbary Ryswell, widowed of a fry and bitter as wind off the shivering sea, received the party within a hall roofed in slate so dark it absorbed the light. She wore black furs. Her voice carried the clang of old bronze shields. "I remember Margaery's grandsire," she said, gaze flinty. "His sweet wines could not buy northern loyalty. Have you come to peddle honeyed mead and silken promises, girl?" Margaery curtsied with impeccable grace. "No, my lady. Only wheat and steel." "And what price?" Ryswell asked. "Justice," Margaery said. "And spring." The older woman's lips pursed, but she nodded. Spring may yet thaw even a phrased treachery from these stones. Rations were taken aboard Nar longboats to speed up coast under sail. The main column rode inland along the wolf-teeth hills of Flint's Finger. Trails so narrow wagons had to be dismantled and slung across garrons like dead stags. Willis Tyrell joked it was a Reachman's punishment for fat harvests. Yet he directed the labor with tireless cheer, earning respect from hard Northfolk and used to southern lordlings' sweat. During one grueling ascent, a rope snapped, sending a wagon bed skidding. It would have crushed a Karstark boy had Margaery not lunged, seizing his collar and yanking him clear. The wood sled crashed, splintering. Jon, rushing over, found her cradling the shaken lad while her own palm bled from a jagged nail. He wrapped the wound with strips torn from his undershirt. The Karstark captain bowed stiffly. "My lady saved my nephew. House Karstark owes her blood debt." At dusk, Jon visited her tent. She winced when he unwrapped the dressing. Splinters glinted beneath flushed skin. He used a heated needle, murmuring comfort. Margaery bit her lip until the shard slid free, then sighed. "Another echo," she said. He met her eyes. "This one sings brave." Outside, Bran sat by the embers with Maester Wolkan, learning the tongues of ravens. The boy's direwolf, Summer, kept silent vigil. At times Bran's gaze clouded, and Jon sensed the threads of unseen weirwoods tugging his brother's mind elsewhere. In those moments ice crawled Jon's spine. Power, ancient and hungry, pooled within Bran like moonlight in a still pond. Yet when Bran blinked and grinned at Rickon's antics, sledding down an icy scree on a shield, he was simply a boy again. The party emerged upon an overlook 5 leagues south of Winterfell. Smoke curled from the castle's chimneys. New raised wooden palisades girdled its scarred walls where Ramsay's torches had licked. Bolton banners flapped. The peeling pink man. Jon's jaw clenched. Beside him, Margaery watched the towers in silence. Between them and the castle sprawled encampments. Bolton Host to the west, Stannis's to east of the King's Road ford. Ragged tents, siege lines half-carved through snow. A no-man's land lay thick with frozen corpses. Black carrion crows hopped from limp standard to shattered pavis. Jon inhaled. The air reeked of wood smoke overlaying rot. "We cannot march through 2 armies," Davos warned. "Nor can we wait. They skirmish daily, bleeding each other thin. Soon one will strike full." He tapped the map. "There's a culvert here, a drainage channel from the Wolf's Run. A daring few might slip under Bolton nose." Willis chuckled. "A daring few meaning you, Onion Knight?" "Old smugglers love tunnels," Davos replied. Jon nodded. "We must rescue survivors loyal to House Stark within." He glanced at Bran. "Our family's bones lie beneath those crypts. We will not leave them to flayers." Margaery stepped forward. "Then let me accompany you."
"No," Sir Willis objected.
"Too perilous." She faced her brother. "I serve our banner by more than grain counts, Willis. And if we gain Winterfell's heart, a Tyrell seal may sway garrison captains weary of Bolton cruelty." Jon weighed risk. "I cannot promise safety. Safety is a garden myth," she said quietly. "Let us till soil with courage." That night beneath wan moonlight, a band of 15 slipped from camp. Jon, Margaery, Davos, Val, Willis, Bowen Marsh, Lyanna Mormont. Though small, she would not be denied 3 Karstark Rangers and 4 Free Folk Scouts. They skated across frozen ponds, clambered through reed beds, and reached the culvert. Iron grill twisted long ago by siege fire. Davos wriggled through first, torch stub clenched between teeth. Stale tunnel air stank of mold and forgotten blood. Ice glazed the stone channel, forcing them to crawl on hands and knees, water seeping through cloaks. After half an hour, distant torchlight glimmered ahead, sewer junction beneath the outer yard. Voices slurred above, Bolton guards trading jests. Jon signaled halt, then edged up a narrow maintenance shaft. Through a rotted floor grate, he glimpsed boots pacing. He timed the rhythm, then silently lifted the grate as Val sprang. Her knife kissed soft neck. The guard sagged without cry. Willis caught the corpse, lowering it back to drain. They repeated twice more. Soon they emerged into a dark storeroom reeking of turnips and dried herring. Margaery pressed a linen kerchief to her nose while Jon sealed the door with a rusted chain. "We find Maester Luwin's tower," he whispered. "If he lives, he'll rally holdfast servants." They navigated corridors by memory and shadow. Winterfell's once familiar halls felt alien under Bolton banners. Candle smoke mingled with urine's acrid tang. They passed cells where children whimpered. Lyanna's face hardened into stone. A clatter of boots ahead. Jon flattened against alcove tapestries, pulling Margaery close. Bolton patrol filed past. 5 men, laughing about a kennel girl's screams. When they vanished, Margaery trembled with fury. "Echoes," she breathed. Luwin's solar lay atop the broken maester's turret. rebuilt with hastily patched stones. Jon crept the spiral, heart hammering. Inside, flicker of candle behind shutter. He pushed the door, barred. Soft voice, "Go away!" Jon whispered the maester's name. Silence, then scraping timber. The door inched open. A gaunt figure peered, age-creased but unmistakable. "Jon," Luwin rasped. Relief washed through Jon. "We bring allies." He ushered group inside. Luwin hugged Bran, tears sparkling. "I thought you beyond the wall." Bran smiled, placing a hand on the old maester's cheek. "Home calls." They spoke quickly. Bolton numbers, prisoner locations, hidden armories. Luwin pointed to a secret stair leading beneath the library to crypt entrances. Few knew. Jon formed plan. Open postern gate near Hunter's Walk for the main host at dawn. But first, release kitchen small folk to spark chaos, and seize bells to signal uprising. Davos turned to Margaery. "Think you can rouse hearts in the Great Hall?" She nodded. "Give me a dais and truth." Jon squeezed her hand. "Stay alive." They split. Val and Free Folk wiped runes of war paint on cheeks, vanished down servant tunnels. Lynna shadowed Margaery, knife in belt. Jon, Willis, and Davos descended to the crypt stairs, Bran riding Jon's back piggy style, as when they played giants long ago, Rickon trailing with Shaggy Dog pacing behind. Cold stones swallowed them. Dust motes danced in torchlight. Statues of stark kings stared, dire wolves at their feet. At Eddard's sarcophagus Jon paused, grief knifing anew. Bran touched the carved face. "Father watches," he whispered. "He knows our names." Above, muted clamor, shouting, clashing steel. The revolt begun earlier than planned. Davos cursed softly. "Best hurry." They emerged into a corridor near the armory. Bolton guards sprinted past toward Racket. Willis felled one with mace. Jon parried another, sword flashing. Clangor echoed. Meanwhile Margaery strode into the great hall, Lyanna at heel, cloak torn to show Tyrell rose over stark gray surcoat. Fires crackled, casting bars of orange along trestle tables. Servants huddled, eyes wide. Boltons forced them to kneel at blade point. At sight of newcomers, confusion rippled. Margaery's voice rose clear as silver trumpets. "Winterfell is no flayer's kennel. The North remembers. Stand for Wolf and Rose." A kitchen girl screamed, swung iron pot at her captor. Chaos exploded. Knives flew, benches overturned. Lynna leapt upon long table, slashing. Margaery seized a fallen spear, but struck a guard's temple. Blood spattered banners. Bells clanged from belfry. Free Folk had reached them. In outer yard Jon and his band fought toward Gate Winch. Arrows hissed. Snow turned pink. Bran, sheltered behind a cart, closed his eyes. Suddenly ravens poured from broken lofts, swirling like black storm, dive-bombing Bolton archers, clawing faces. Jon yelled, driving sword through a sergeant. Willis heaved the winch. Chains groaned. Gate creaked open. Beyond, Karstark and Manderley vanguard surged. Wolves howling, wildlings chanting. Battle consumed courtyard. Steel ringing, shields splintering. Overhead, banners ripped free. Stark direwolf unfurled. Tyrell rose rippled. Bolton flayed man sagged half-severed from pole. Margaery emerged from hall doorway, face smeared with soot and blood, eyes blazing. She spotted Jon across melee. He saw her slender form braced, spear haft steady. Pride ignited within him. He cut path toward her. Together they pressed onward, pressing flayed men back toward kennels where Ramsay's hounds snarled behind bars. Lynna Mormont, small yet ferocious, planted Bear Island's sigil upon broken parapet. Boys too young held crossbows beside her, arrows loosed with grim purpose. Val's yell rose from battlements where she grappled a Bolton archer, sending him over. By twilight Winterfell's yard fell silent save moans of wounded. Fires guttered. Snowflakes drifted, soft as prayer shawls over slain. Jon stood with sword point resting upon packed snow. Shadow, muzzle red, sat at his side. Across yard, Ramsay Bolton lay beneath Margaery's spear. alive, wrists bound, eyes wild. She had spared him at Jon's word, justice, not vengeance. He would face northern judgment. In crypt shadows Bran wheeled forward. "The heart tree calls," he murmured. Jon led them to Godswood, where moonlight silver filtered through bare branches. The weirwood's red leaves shivered though no wind blew. Bran placed palm upon trunk. His voice rang like distant horns. "Winterfell is free." Silence fell, a silence brimming with memory older than men. Snowflakes melted upon warm earth where spring's first shoots dared peek. Margaery knelt beside Jon, her skirts spreading like green tide across white. He took her hand, dirt under nails, blood upon knuckles. Their fingers entwined. "Alliances forged," she whispered. "Tended," he replied. Above them the northern lights blossomed anew, ribbons of rose aflame over midnight vault. Wolf and rose banners snapped upon tower heights, the dire wolf seeming to leap, the rose to bloom, both carried by that spectral wind. Yet Jon knew winter's war had only shifted, not ended. Stannis encamped still. Lannister gold would march, and to the far north, beyond even wildling songs, white walkers stirred beneath tomb-cold stars. But here, for a breath, hope rooted. And he, once bastard, now husband and guardian, felt the pull of the earth under his boots, the hum of Margaery's pulse beneath calloused thumb, the hush before new chapters. He leaned close, forehead touching hers. "Spring will come." Her answering smile warmed the night. "And when it does, the world will smell of roses." Their kiss beneath the heart tree sealed promise deeper than parchment or crown. The gods would listen, branches creaking softly, as if the old gods themselves murmured assent. In the quiet that followed, distant horn blasts signaled scouting parties returning with news of Stannis' envoys seeking parley. Another knot to untie, another echo to shape. Jon rose, pulling Margaery gently to her feet. Shoulder to shoulder, they stepped from beneath the weirwood's bloody canopy into starlight falling upon freshly claimed stone. In that mingled glow of aurora and torch, direwolf shadow and rose petal, the first lines of a new northern saga etched themselves upon the snows. Not of kings alone, nor bastards redeemed, but of hearts that chose each other amid the storm, and thus taught winter to remember spring. Night bled silently into dawn across Winterfell's torn ramparts, coloring snowblank rooftops with a hush of bruised violet before dawn's first coals stirred behind the eastern hills. Atop the battlements Jon Snow stood alone, hands wrapped around the cold stone merlin, watching ghost frost plume from his lips. Below, the courtyard still bore the scars of last night's struggle. Churned drifts where men had fallen, black patches of frozen blood, fragments of broken shields embedded like macabre flowers in the snowpack. He traced each blemish with his eyes and found himself murmuring the dead men's names, friend and foe alike, because in the dark all faces had looked the same, no banners, only breath and desperate steel. Somewhere on the lower ward a hammer rang. The blacksmith had resumed his anvil song before sunrise, shaping hinges for gates torn off their pins. From the great keep drifted the smell of barley porridge, wood smoke, and the tang of simmering spruce needles. Margaery's notion, a northern tonic brewed from a healer's manuscript Maester Luwin thought lost. The Reachmen grumbled at the bitterness, but Jon had seen frostbite fade to pink beneath the concoction's heat and would not let their jests sway him. Footsteps crunched in the drifted snow behind. Margaery emerged, cloak silvered with rime. She had risen before the cooks, she said, to help prepare poultices. Her hands bore faint stains of red alder bark, and strands of chestnut hair escaped her braid like copper filaments. She joined Jon at the parapet, following his gaze across the encampments beyond the walls where the banners of Stannis Baratheon fluttered a league away, their fiery hearts dulled by distance. "They send riders hourly," she noted. "Each time the maester meets them at the gatehouse, you refuse audience." Jon's fingertips tapped the stone unconsciously, like a man counting heartbeats. "Each time I weigh the cost of welcoming a king who burns gods and men alike." He watched a raven wheel overhead, black feather silhouetted against the pale sky. "I will meet him soon. But I need Winterfell to breathe first, not choke on new oaths." She studied the thin scrim of clouds, colorless as washed wool. "Every oath we forge becomes a seed," she said. "If we plant too many in frozen ground, none may sprout come spring." Jon's gaze softened. Walls around his shoulders seemed to ease. "You speak as Bran does. Metaphors buried in roots and branches." "Roots and petals," she corrected, offering a small crooked smile that warmed the dawn more than any brazier. "Speaking of seeds, we must decide Ramsay's fate before Stannis demands it." She nodded toward the distant kennels, now guarded by Karstark men. "Word spreads faster than ravens. The tale will reach King's Landing soon enough." Jon's face hardened again. Execution seems mercy. Wolf justice would be truer. Yet even as he spoke, memory rose of Eddard Stark's steady hand on Ice's pommel, the lesson of clean deaths. "I would have Bran pronounce judgment," he added. "The heir of Winterfell must speak for those the Boltons silenced." "And if Ramsay begs the wall?" she asked. "He will find no brothers to shield him there," Jon replied, voice like hoarfrost. The sound of creaking wheels interrupted. Bran approached, pushed by Rickon, who insisted on racing the chair down the snow-slick ramp. They skidded to a halt with boyish laughter, Shaggy Dog and Summer bounding beside them, flurries billowing from their fur. Bran greeted Margaery with a courtly nod, oddly regal despite wool layers bundled to his chin. "Maester Luwin says the moat ice will thaw soon," he announced. "He worries the inner wall's foundation stones may shift." His expression carried something deeper, an awareness beyond his years. "The trees whisper of long springs before the wall, but they also whisper of rivers under stone. We should shore them." Jon looked from his brother to the jagged scabs where fire-blackened masonry still gaped. "We'll set masons on it once Stannis departs. Or joins us," Rickon scoffed. "He'll bend knee to Bran, you'll see. His fiery god can't keep him warm up here." He puffed his cheeks and blew clouds into the air, mimicking dragon breath. Margaery placed a hand atop Rickon's snow-dusted hair. "If dragons came to Winterfell, they would find the stables quite snug," she teased. Rickon's grin split wide. Footsteps approached. Ser Willis, face haggard from sleepless hours setting pickets, accompanied by Davos Seaworth. The Onion Knight carried a parchment roll sealed with Stannis' stag in flame. He bowed slightly to the young Starks. "His grace grows impatient. He demands audience before First Watch ends." Jon nodded. "Tell him at midday the gates will open. For him alone, unarmed save his sword." Davos grimaced. "My king travels nowhere without his honor guard." "Then he will wait," Jon said. Margaery's gaze lingered on Davos. "Ser Davos," she requested, "carry word that Lady Margaery Tyrell respectfully petitions Queen Celis' presence to tour the Winterfell libraries. I believe we share interest in ancient texts." Davos's brows rose. "An unusual appeal, my lady, yet I will deliver it." As he departed, Willis gave his sister a knowing look. "You would host Celis Baratheon? The woman thinks roses sinful." "She thinks most pleasures sinful," Margaery replied lightly. "Yet libraries are rarely pleasures to her, which makes them safe. While she pores over dusty scrolls, Stannis may lower his guard." She turned to Jon. "You will need every lever." Jon's respect deepened. "We do this together." The morning passed in furious toil. Men hauled charred beams from the collapsed brewery. Tyrell engineers surveyed ramparts for reinforcement. Wildling spears now served as sentries on the ancient watchwalks. Val strode among them, issuing curt orders. Her furs crimson with Bolton blood, she refused to wash clean until every flayed banner was ash. She and Lyanna Mormont forged an unlikely pairing. Wild heiress and fierce cub, unified by contempt for weakness. When arguments flared between northern lords and free folk over patrol arcs, Lyanna's shrill voice cut through. "We face the same winter. Which side of the wall matters not when dead men ride the storm." None dared rebut. A hush swept the yard as midday neared. Snowflakes drifted bigger than coins, settling on helms, cloaks, charred beams alike. Jon stood by the main gate, flanked not by outriders but by Bran and Margaery. as he had decreed. 2 Karstark axemen worked the capstan. The gate groaned upward. Stannis Baratheon rode through alone on a tall auburn destrier, followed by only one attendant. Melisandre of Ashai, cloaked in scarlet wool that glowed against the snow like embers fanned by wind. Stannis dismounted stiffly, boot crunching, eyes sweeping walls patched with fresh planks and fletching-studded beams. He bowed neither to Jon nor Margaery, but his stare locked on Bran. "The boy many claim dead," he said. "The boy who lives," Bran responded, voice strong. Stannis's gaunt features betrayed surprise. "And speaks plainly. Good." He turned to Jon. "I come for justice, Lord Snow." "Justice is here," Jon said. "Winterfell passed to the Starks by right of ancient kings. You hold no claim save conquest, which died when you retreated to these camps." Melisandre's eyes flickered crimson in the light of her pendant. "The one you call Snow has king's blood," she murmured in her low, musical accent. "Azor Ahai reborn may yet stand among us." Jon ignored the prophecy bait. "The north bleeds, your grace. Offer us aid, grain, and soldiers to face the dead in the far frost, and you will have our swords against your foes in the south. Demand our knees now, and you break what little hope remains." Stannis's jaw flexed. For a breath, the only sound was thaw water dripping from icicles along the hoardings. Then he replied, "Hope is a treacherous counselor, yet I am not blind. The lion stirs in the west, the roses hold the reach, and Winterfell's throne now seats a union of both." His eyes flicked to Margaery. "I will parley, dispatch provisions, share smiths, and in return I require one pledge. When I march on King's Landing, the North's banners fly at my flank." Jon traded glances with Margaery and Bran. Bran's head inclined once. Margaery stepped forward, cloak trailing. "We will march when winter's threat is broken, but this castle stands first against the storm from beyond the wall. Lend us your mages, wards, fires that burn cold things. Lend us your siege smiths and quartermasters so that we can hold." Melisandre's lips curved. "The Lord of Light's fires burn brightest amidst darkness. We will kindle them here." Stannis exhaled white mist. "Very well. A truce. Until spring." Jon extended a gauntlet hand. Stannis clasped it, grip iron. No cheers rang, only relieved exhales. That night, a feast of necessity replaced the cheerless silence of previous evenings. Ranks of barrel ovens roasted salted boar delivered by Karstark trappers. Tyrell cooks folded rye mash into honey cakes, thin but fragrant. Stannis and his officers ate in the great hall beside wildlings, reachmen, northmen. A strange assembly seldom imagined even by tavern scops. At Jon's insistence, Ramsay Bolton was chained on a dais corner, forced to watch plenty beyond his deprived reach. He sneered until Lyanna Mormont jabbed a spoonful of hot mustard into the cut on his cheek. His screams were drowned by laughter from free folk. Later, Bran summoned the household to the square of cracked flagstones before the heart tree for judgment. Snowfall ceased as though even the skies wished witness. Bran's chair faced Ramsay. Rickon flanked with Shaggy Dog. Jon and Margaery stood side by side, their presence binding north and south. Bran's voice carried beyond expectation, reverberating off broken stone. "Ramsay Bolton, you stand accused of murder, treachery, flaying of innocents, and seizure of Winterfell. How plead you?" Ramsay's eyes glittered. "I plead hunger," he spat. "I plead wolves and crows shall feast upon your bones when the true war comes." He bared teeth, chains rattling. "You think me monster, but monsters keep the cold at bay." Jon's hand closed on Longclaw's pommel. Margaery touched his wrist. The tension eased. Bran's gaze never wavered. "You are monster of man's making, not Winter's. The sentence is death." Jon stepped forward, drawing Longclaw, but Bran raised a hand. "He dies at dawn. Let the night know his fear." He turned his chair and conversation ended. Ramsay's last hours were spent in the former kennel yard he had once ruled. Shaggy Dog prowled the perimeter, low growls rumbling. Margaery, passing with bundles of clean bandages for the infirmary, paused outside the rusty bars, Ramsay's eyes fixed on her. "Pretty Rose, will you free me?" he wheedled. "I'll be your puppy." She met his gaze without flinching. "I free you in truth," she said softly. "Tomorrow the world need not endure your bark." She walked away. Dawn broke in shards of rose-gold fire, fitting tribute from the east. Ramsay's head fell to Longclaw's bite in one stroke. Jon wiped blade upon snow before replacing in scabbard. Val and Wildling spears placed the body upon a pyre outside the walls. Melisandre kindled it with words in a tongue older than castles. Flames leapt high, carrying the stench of burnt fat and sinew. Snowflakes hissed to steam. With judgment settled, Bran directed labor lines. Rebuild stable roofs, clear crypt airs of smoke, carve new drain channels. Margaery organized infirmaries, dividing the Great Hall into wards separated by linen screens on rope lines. She dispatched letters south on swift wings, calling Tyrell grain fleets to White Harbor and Ser Garland to muster garden knights willing to ride north before winter roads closed entirely. "Tell them roses bloom even in snow," she wrote, sealing wax with the rose wolf crest. Afternoons dwindled into routines. Jon chaired councils with Stannis' captains, devising watch rotations along the King's Road. Davos shared smuggling maps of inlets where ironborn longships still prowled. Willis drafted timber requisitions. Karstark smiths forged nails while Tyrell carpenters raised scaffolds. Asha Greyjoy arrived with her reavers one eve, banners furled. She bargained salt wives for steel and coal, promising raids on Lannister supply convoys. "The sea remembers debts," she told Jon, clasping wrists in iron-born salute. "You freed me once in a cage of snow. I'll drown your enemies in their wine." As moon cycles turned, Winterfell stirred with life unseen since Robb's call to banners. Children chased each other through rebuilt archways. Wolf pups from summer's latest litter tumbled underfoot. The scent of pine tar and fresh-hewn oak replaced char. Yet unease lingered like frost in marrow. Scouts returning from last hearth spoke of pale shadows sweeping over night camps, of voices in the wind that sounded like cracking ice plates. Wildling mystics muttered of the Night King rousing his armies at the fist of the first men. One bitter dawn, a horn blast shattered stillness, the three-note warning of White Walkers. Jon raced to the ramparts. Over the distant snowfields stretched a dark smear, marching ranks of dead, their eyes glimmering azure beneath iron-gray clouds. The army was still leagues off, yet with them crept tendrils of unnatural cold that bit exposed cheeks like shards of obsidian. Stannis joined Jon, jaw stone. "They come sooner than your watch predicted." Mance's ravens spoke of heavy mustering, Jon said, voice tight. "But not this speed." Margaery climbed the steps, cloak whipped by an unholy wind. She placed her hand upon Jon's arm, the warmth startling in that icy air. "We must make ready." The following hours blurred. Maesters counted arrow shafts. Smiths quenched blades in dragonglass dust. Melisandre carved sigils into braziers brimming with oil. Bran lay upon a litter under the heart tree, eyes rolled white as he slipped into Warg dream, sending summer racing across the fields to scout. When he returned, he spoke of giants in chains and wights riding skeletal elk. As dusk bled in, torches ringed Winterfell's outer ward, red coals among expanding gloom. Jon addressed assembled defenders, Northmen, Reachmen, Free Folk, Ironborn, Baratheon soldiers, arrayed in ragged lines. "We hold the walls tonight, fire and obsidian. Archers aim for blue eyes. Spearmen keep formations. Wolves fight at our flanks. The dead do not tire, but they remember the bite of steel and Valyrian fire." He raised Longclaw, its pale ripple caught torchlight, casting ripples over clan shields. "For the living," he declared. Margaery stood beside Davos distributing small vials of wildfire acquired at great risk from King's Landing saboteurs months earlier. "Only when commanded," she warned each line captain. "Else we burn ourselves." She kept one vial tucked in her girdle. Nightfall arrived on swift wings, bearing the silence before a storm. Then the scream of an ice wight shattered it, an inhuman shriek echoing across the snow belt. A wave of dead surged, armorless limbs pumping, eyes ablaze. Flaming arrows streaked from the walls, and where shafts found flesh, the corpses erupted in green-gold fury as wildfire splashed across clustered bodies. Yet still they came, climbing over their burning brethren. Jon moved like shadow along the ramparts, barking orders, slicing any frost hand that gripped the crenels. His cloak caught a gust, streaming behind like a torn banner. To onlookers he seemed a pale ghost of his father in youth. Stannis fought 2 merlins away, steel flashing red from brazier flare, the Fury stag on his breastplate soot-smudged but unyielding. Melisandre chanted upon the tower roof, summoning living flame. Pyres blazed where arrow oil soaked. Below, Margaery organized the wounded triage with terrifying calm. She bound gashes, cracked instructions to pages to fetch boiling wine, and when a wight forced through a postern door, thrust a dragonglass dagger into its throat herself. The creature collapsed, icy veins spidering across stone. Her hands trembled only after it fell. Then she exhaled and pressed onward. Hours merged. At the second moonrise, a thunderclap shook the night. A massive figure loomed at the south gate. A dead giant shackled in iron, pulling a battering ram of frozen oak. 3 more giants appeared, yanked by white chains. Each crash of the ram cracked timber struts. Jon ordered boiling tar poured. Stannis flung torches, yet the gate groaned. Bran's voice echoed suddenly from every raven perched along parapets. He warned them to speak. "The crypt tunnels," he warned. Jon's blood iced. If whites tunneled from forgotten culverts, the living would be trapped between walls and courtyard. He spun, "Margaery, gather every available runner.
Seal crypt Tyrells.
Hold them." She nodded, face smeared with soot, and vanished with Lyanna down spiral stairs. Jon remained with 50 sword arms to repel gate crashing. Bolts sheared. Off giant flesh, they lumbered undeterred. Val scaled a hoist rope, leaping onto the giant's shoulder. She drove an obsidian spear point into the nape where spine met skull. The colossus folded, chains dragging the next giant sideways. Yet the battering ram swung one last time. Gates burst open, shards blasting inward. The horde poured. Jon leapt from parapet to inner landing, slashing. Behind him Stannis rallied Baratheon halberdiers. Snow churned red. A white walker strode through the breach, crystalline blade humming. Jon met its charge. Longclaw rang as frost magic skittered along Valyrian steel. Sparks flew like stars. Each impact numbed Jon's arm. Finally he feinted a high strike, rolled beneath the parry, and severed the walker's knee. As it toppled, he drove Longclaw under its breastbone. The creature shattered into ice dust, but the tide seemed endless. Horn blasts sounded again. For this time, Bran's new signal. From the darkness beyond Winterfell, a second line of torches approached. Hundreds. Karstark militia, Manderly levies, Tyrell knights arriving from White Harbor convoys, marching through storms for days. At their head rode Ser Garland, cloak half frozen to his shoulders. They crashed into the white flank, scattering them like corn before scythes. Inside crypt passages, Margaery and Lyanna fought side by side. Whites broke through barred doors. Stone corridors echoed with clanging steel and wet snarls. The girls retreated stepwise, luring the dead into narrow choke points where only one could advance. Behind them huddled maids and cooks. Bran's litter pushed by Maester Luwin further into dark tunnels lit by sputtering pitch torches. When Margaery dropped her last dragonglass blade, she drew the wildfire vial, smashed it against the stone floor ahead. Green flame roared, filling passage. Heat flattened her. Hair singed. White sparked like tinder thrashing. Smoke roiled choking, but the line held. Above, dawn glimmered behind thin clouds, painting skeletal treetops pale rose. The first rays struck Winterfell's battlements, and the whites screamed, limbs smoking. Those outside the walls froze mid-stride as though trapped in amber. Ice crystals burst across skin. The white walkers hissed and retreated, herding what remained of their corpse thralls northward. Throughout courtyards, piles of bodies stilled, inert without their master's will. A hush fell heavier than snow. Jon slumped against a cracked parapet, chest heaving. Across yard he saw Margaery emerging from the crypt stair, hair singed, cheeks ash-streaked, but eyes alight. She half-stumbled toward him. He met her halfway, pulling her into embrace. Neither spoke. Their breaths formed mingling clouds. Stannis surveyed the carnage, then motioned Melisandre. She studied the rising sun with awe. "The dawn answered," she murmured. "Lightbringer may yet be forged." Jon ignored her. He helped Margaery to the great keep's doorway where Bran awaited, pale but alert. Crows fluttered around the boy, settling on shoulders, silent. "We held?" Bran asked. Jon nodded. "The north breathes," Bran whispered. Margaery clasped Jon's sooty hand. "And roses still bloom." 3 days passed as pyres burned night and day outside the walls, smoke spiraling into cloud-choked skies. Survivors slept in shifts, haunted by frostbitten dream faces. Yet Winterfell's halls rang with quiet resilience. Hammers shaping new arrowheads, children murmuring lessons with Luwin in the solar, Tyrell herbalists teaching healers to distill spruce needle salves. On the fourth dawn, a raven from Castle Black arrived, Samwell Tarly's hand. The message told of Archmaester records that spoke of Dragonsteel, stored in crypt vaults beneath Old Town's Hightower Library. At Margaery's urging, Jon convened council. They would send envoys south, leveraging Tyrell ports to secure the cache before Lannister spies. Stannis pledged ships. Asha offered longships for quick retrieval. Plans blossomed like frost flowers on a window pane. Dangerous, fragile, but shining. That night Jon and Margaery walked the Godswood where moonbeams silvered the heart tree's tears. Snow dusted her hair, catching faint starlight. He brushed it away, fingers grazing her cheek. She leaned into his palm, eyelids fluttering. In that breath they felt the hush once more, but now it thrummed with nascent life rather than fear. He spoke first. "When Father stood here, he prayed for strength. I pray for wisdom." She entwined their fingers. "Wisdom grows from hearts that listen." She placed his hand over her heart. "Keep listening." Wind rustled crimson leaves. Somewhere a dire wolf sang, a long note of sorrow fading into promise. Jon tilted her chin, brushed lips to her forehead, then her mouth soft, lingering. Their kiss tasted of ash and wintergreen, of burnt pyres and newborn dawns. Pulling slightly back, Margaery smiled, eyes luminous. "We will have our 5 hours yet," she breathed. Jon laughed, quiet, surprised, the sound of ice cracking to reveal running water beneath. "A lifetime," he corrected, and drew her to the stone bench beneath the heart tree, where they sat in companionable silence while snow fell like confetti of blessings. Far beyond Winterfell's walls, the Night King brooded within a spiral of blue fire atop an ancient glacier, watching stars spiral around a black pole of nothingness. But even he, in his undead stillness, could not dim the fragile spark ignited that night between Wolf and Rose. A spark carried in letters, in songs, in the heartbeat of every child who scurried through Winterfell's halls. Winter would come again, deeper and darker, but the living had proven they could kindle warmth enough to face it. And in that truth lay the seed of all victory, waiting only for spring's whisper to wake.